In this episode of John's Garage, you help me decide, should I take the Chevelle or do I take the Camaro on the Hot Rod Power Tour? I'm in a dilemma, guys. Forever, I was thinking I'm taking the 97 Camaro on the Hot Rod Power Tour. In fact, a lot of the recent episodes have been focused on getting it ready for that. New tires, new suspension, power steering leak is fixed. It is good to go. But I have a problem. The 70 Chevelle that we recently picked up from my dad's is really running good. So I'm tempted. Should I take the Chevelle or should I take the Camaro? So I need your help in making a decision on which one of these needs to go on the Hot Rod Power Tour. Now, before you decide, I think you need a brief history on each car so you get some backstory, and then I'm gonna do a comparison of the two cars with the pros and cons. So let's start with the oldest one first and talk about the Chevelle and how it got to be a part of our family. Back in 1979, my mom was in need of a car. My dad found this gold 1970 Chevelle Malibu for her to drive, and she hated it. That is the truth. She had no choice in the car. She didn't get to see it before it was purchased. She drove it for about a year and a half, and then about that time I got my driver's license. And she hated the car so much that she gave it to me to drive as my high school car. What a lucky break for me. So for the about 82 to 85, I drove the car as my daily driver. And it went through quite a transformation from a stock Malibu toward the end to a full-blown street racing machine with a bored-out 350, big fat tires on the back. It didn't run a hood most of the time. It was a pretty gnarly little beast. And then my dad and I got into a big fight about the car because I wanted to buy it from him. And he wisely said no. And I put it on cinder blocks in his garage, our carport, and it sat there for almost a decade. And then 1992, he and I put it back together so he could enjoy it back as a stock restoration of a 70 Malibu. So the car has been in the family since 1979, and it is something that'll stay in our family forever. So it is super special. So that's the story on the Chevelle. Now to the Camaro. It's been in the family for a long time. 20 years later, in 1999, I bought it. I bought it from a local car dealer. I actually went to go look at a Mustang Cobra convertible that was for sale, and it turned out it was a clone. It wasn't a real Cobra. And I saw off in the distance this silver Camaro. And when I found out it was a 6-speed car, I was intrigued. Long story short, I left that lot that day with the car you see behind me. So we've had it in the family since 1999. I drove it as my daily driver up until I got my truck, which was during COVID in 2020. So for that many years, from 99 to 2020, that was my daily driver. That's the backstory on the Camaro. Both of my girls grew up with that car. They rode in the back seat in their car seats. So it too is super special to the family, and it's not going anywhere. So they both have a backstory. But now let's get into some of the weird similarities between the two cars. Obviously, they're both Chevrolets and they're both convertibles. Beyond that, it even gets more strange. They both have 355 cubic inch small block Chevys in them because they've both been bored 30 over. Both of the engines have been rebuilt. If it's bored over, you can figure that out. And ironically, they have very similar mileage on the engines. On the Chevelle, I actually personally assembled that engine in 1992, and it has 16,000 miles on it since that rebuild. On the Camaro, a local machine shop rebuilt it. It has about 20,000 miles on it. So they have very similar power plants with very similar mileage on them, which is kind of weird. Another weird similarity, they've both been repainted. The Chevelle was repainted in North Carolina by a friend of my dad's in the mid-90s. The Camaro was repainted in 2017 by me and my friend Barry in his shop. So they both have fresh paint jobs, which is kind of interesting. both also have aftermarket wheels on them. The Chevelle has Torque Thrust Ds. The Camaro has the ZR1 Corvette style wheel on it. That is about where the comparisons stop and the differences start beginning. So let's go one car at a time and talk about pros and cons of each one. And we're gonna start in this case with the Camaro because it's the one that I planned on taking from the beginning. So let's talk about why that was. On the Camaro, the reason why it was gonna be the one to drive, it's the only one I had at the time. That makes sense, doesn't it? But what are some of the advantages to the Camaro? Well, on the pro side, it has air conditioning. Yes, believe it or not, it is summertime already, and that is a big, big factor. It also has cruise control, which is another factor because this is a 1,400-mile trip that we're taking on this tour, so that is a big factor. And it has other amenities like power windows, power locks, other things that Chevelle doesn't have. On the con side of things, it rides pretty rough. It is a sports car, and it is a sports car with stepped up suspension and bigger wheels and tires, so that is a factor. So that's kind of a factor. And the biggest factor is it is a manual transmission 6-speed, which was an appeal to me back in the day. But when you're in bumper to bumper traffic for hours on end, which is what a power tour tends to be, that could be problematic. Now, on the pro side of the Chevelle, it rides like a Cadillac. Very, very smooth. It runs really good. It has a very, very highway-ish gear, like a 256 gear in the differential, so the RPMs are low. It's quieter than the Camaro, believe it or not, because the mufflers Dad chose. So for a road trip, it's actually probably a more pleasant experience. But on the con side, no air conditioning. We are working on that, and it's in process, but it will not be ready in time for the power tour. That is a biggie, and no cruise control. But the biggest thing that Chevelle has going for it that has me tempted, look at it. It just has that look. It's gonna grab some attention. Even driving it around town, I can drive my Camaro every day and nobody takes a second look. You drive that on the street, everybody wants to know what it is. So yes, poor Camaro, you just blend into the background, I'm afraid, even though you're probably a better car overall. So that's my dilemma. What would you guys do? I really need to hear from you guys. I want to know two things from you as we wrap up this episode. Number one, do you have a car that's been in your family since 1979, since 1999, for a long time? I'd love to hear that story because I love it when families keep cars for a long time. But the main thing I want to hear from you is which of these two cars would you take on the Hot Rod Power Tour? Would you take the Camaro or would you take the Chevelle? I can't wait to hear from you. I'm going to consider your feedback as we make our decision. And stay tuned to John's Garage because not only will you get an update on which car we're taking, but we're going to tackle a bunch of other projects on both cars in the future. So thanks for watching. I look forward to hearing from you.